Everybody loves wedding cake, but it can turn into a disaster. I mean, if you don't have the right setting for it, it can ruin the photo op, or even worse, if your delivery's at the wrong time, it might just end up in pieces on the floor before your guests even get a chance to taste it. We're going to tell you how to avoid that.
Because I think wedding cake, people are ambivalent about it.
It sort of gets a bad rap now. I can probably count on one hand how many wedding cakes I've had in the last few years. Most people sort of skip it, sadly.
I think unless people want the photo with it, and it's a shame. Cheesecakes are really big at the moment because people love the idea of dessert tables. Yeah, I mean, great idea, but I mean, I like a cake. I think it's a great photo opportunity.
Definitely.
I think
provided it's set up correctly.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's so many things to consider. People think, oh yes, the cake works well here, but then they haven't factored in where they're standing to cut the cake. So if you're standing on this side, what's the background like? Where's the photographer going to stand? You need to factor that in before you actually make that decision.
But I think as well, another thing that people don't think about is what the stature of the cake is relative to their size.
Completely agree. Yes. And the size of the venue, the space, the room you're in.
Exactly. And what size table it's on, what the cake stand is going to be like. Does it suit the venue? Does it suit your cake?
Yeah.
So if both of you are sort of like approaching 6 foot, a little 1 or 2 tier cake is not going to do it. You need something a little bit more dramatic. If you're in a big ballroom, a big castle, you can have a big bit of drama with your wedding cake. If you're in
good drama,
obviously. If you're in a more bohemian background, well then something like a semi-naked cake.
Yeah, something more natural.
Really well with and again, what flower decoration
real
goes
flowers,
on your cake.
Sugar flowers.
But then real flowers, are they edible flowers, or are they going to, this is something that people don't actually consider when they think about having real flowers on the cake, that sometimes real flowers will have, product on them, to prolong the life of the flower. Maybe they have a spray on them, maybe they have a pesticide on them. Well then, that's going to affect the
melt onto the
cake icing. And then that icing has to be cut off by the caterer ahead of time. One thing that I think people really have a problem with sometimes is that when they're asked the caterer to cut the cake up for them to serve it as dessert, and they're charging for it, they want to know, well, why is the caterer charging? When I would say, they have to portion the slice unless your cake delivery comes in pre-portioned.
Which I usually suggest they do, because it's much easier if the cake maker does
portions the cake. But if it has to be served, well, then you can't just put a piece of cake on the plate as dessert. It has to have something.
Because it doesn't look so good.
It doesn't look great. So, they have to present it in a particular way. So that's what they're charging for. They're not, they have to charge it for the plate.
Well, imagine how long it takes one person to sort of dismantle this cake and then sort of cut 300 slices of it.
But even if they get the slices pre-cut, a chef still has to plate it and has to dress each of those plates. So, dummy cakes, do you like them or not?
I am 100% on with dummy cakes because they're much easier to handle. Mm-hmm. They're much easier to set up. You don't have to worry that it's really going to come toppling down because it's not that heavy. It's much lighter. Because these tiers, cake weighs a ton.
So let's just clarify what a dummy cake is. So a dummy cake
is... It's not very intellectual.
No, I know. It's not real cake that has been iced. It is polystyrene that has been iced.
Layers of polystyrene that's been iced and marzipan and everything and is decorated.
To make it look like your real cake.
It's a showpiece.
However, your real cake is, here's one I've prepared earlier, is sitting in the kitchen waiting to be served.
Yeah. And the dummy cakes work in the sense of... especially if you're going to cut and then serve. It's much easier. If you don't have the time to sort of have the cake then taken into the kitchen, cut up, because that does take time, then it's a good solution to that. I have it kind of is a disaster story, because I had a huge, I think it was about 6 or 7 tiers, dummy cake. Mm-hmm. And there's always a cutting wedge.
Yes.
So
do you have a cutting tier or a section?
I usually have a cutting wedge.
Okay, interesting.
And then it's kind of that area where they cut it, and it's much easier than having a tier, because that tier then usually doesn't even get used.
Yeah.
in most cases. So then the cake actually stays in position. You cut it and then something, it gets served from cut portions. I had, again, scenario where this compere from the band decided, it was a Russian wedding, he decided he was taking over the cutting of the cake.
I can see where this
decided
is going.
He was taking over. And so he was like, no, Bruce, off to the side. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to let you do what you do. And he was just saying whatever he was saying in Russian, and the bride and groom are up at the cake, and everybody's waiting for them to cut. But of course, he didn't tell them where to cut. So they're literally slicing through polystyrene.
Oh, no.
With a knife. And the bride is like so petite, and she's like, and they're looking at me, and I'm like, go over and like, you want to cut on this side? And then it worked.
I think some things, though, people forget about is the temperature of wherever their cake is going to be displayed. So a lot of people love the idea of, say, a semi-naked cake or one that's covered in buttercream, or even like croquembouche, which has been covered with spun sugar.
Yeah.
On a very warm day, the sugar is going to react with the heat, could potentially melt, and your cake could possibly fall apart. And also with a buttercream cake, it is going, there's the potential to melt again, depending on where it's displayed. So don't put it in front of a window.
And you've just made me think of another topic.
Go on.
Auntie Brenda's going to make the cake.
Yes.
And that's where, if you're not dealing with a professional and this is her first attempt at a 5-tier, if they're not doweled properly and set properly, the whole thing is going to be the leaning or falling over Tower of Pisa.
This is true, because no matter how stable the base is, if the cake hasn't been put together properly, and if she doesn't assemble it and it arrives in pieces with no instructions, somebody has to take responsibility for that. And also you need to check that your venue is going to allow you bring in an outside cake from a family member.
Because they're not liable then for, food poisoning or...
Exactly, yeah. I think the biggest mistakes people make is in regards to communicating what they want done with their cake. So not just in terms of display, but also when they want the cake served.
Yeah.
If they want any of the cake kept, and telling people what is to be done with the cake, or else they want it kept and just forget ever to collect it.
And that's at the initial consultation point with the person who's making the cake. It's having those talks to decide, and they should be able to educate the couple to say, well, what do you plan on doing it with? Because if you are keeping the top tier, then that should come with a separate box that the top tier goes in to then be, carried
brought back
home.
to be put in the freezer or something like that. And, and your cake maker will label those boxes so that your venue knows, but you also need to communicate with your venue or your caterer so that they know to keep the cake for you.
And but then along the line, it's coordinating delivery, because, delivery and setup of the cake there's a fine or small window of opportunity almost.
Yeah.
It's before the guests arrive, obviously, or before the photos of the venue get taken.
And if the florist is needed before the florist leaves, so that the florist can finish off.
But so that all of the technical production has been done, so nobody's going to turn around with a ladder and...
But also the other thing is, if you're in a venue that doesn't do a lot of weddings, make sure they have a cake knife.
Yeah.
And a cake stand.
I bring my own.
Well,
just in case.
Well, there you go.
Well, we travel. We need to talk about one day.
Yes.
What we travel with.
What we travel with. That is definitely a thing.
Back to
kit
cake.
Bag. Yeah, back to cake. So I think, make sure that there is a cake stand for the cake, or something that the cake is going to be displayed on.
A pretty cake stand.
But a pretty table as well that the cake can go on. That there is a cake knife.
A stable table.
A stable table. That the venue and everybody knows what is being done with the cake, when it is being served, how many tiers are being cut,
who's carrying it out or doing whatever to it,
how it's going to be displayed.
Yeah.
So if you are ordering different tiers, and this happens at the consultation with the cake company, and I think you don't necessarily have to choose all of the flavors when you book your cake, but as long as you book your cake maker in advance for the day that you need them, and give them all of the details.
So they understand also how many tiers and how many, because you need to physically understand how many people each tier feeds.
Yes, But I think it's important to book that person in
Yeah.
so that they can schedule it within their production plan. And then a few months out, you can meet them and talk to them about the cake flavour and the style and design of the cake. So in conclusion,
Picking your wedding cake, enjoyable, but think of the logistics.
definitely think of the logistics, think of the flavours that you like, and just factor in how they're going to be displayed and what your cake is going to look like on the wedding day.
Yeah, and set it up for success.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
And do hit the bell icon. And do hit the bell. And do hit the bell icon, because then you'll be notified of any upcoming new videos.
Where is the bell icon?
I don't know, top, bottom? Just ring the bell.
Just ring the bell.